roofs of the village huts, as though the spirits were wailing in sorrow. Deep in the heart of Umuaku, a small and once prosperous Igbo village nestled between thick forest and wide river banks, the night seemed darker than usual. The moon, once bright and full, hid behind thick clouds, casting an eerie silence across the land. It was on this ominous night that Akudo came into the world. Akudo's birth was not a celebrated event. There were no drums, no ululations, no feast to welcome her. Instead, she was born into the cold arms of indifference, wrapped not in the warmth of a mother's embrace but in the cruel hands of fate. Akudo's mother, Chinya, had once been the pride of Umuaku. She was a tall, beautiful woman with skin like smooth ebony, eyes that glistened with the wisdom of her ancestors, and a smile that could calm even the most restless child. Men from surrounding villages often visited Umuaku to admire her beauty, and women spoke of her with envy. But Chinya had a secret, one that had sealed her fate and the fate of her child even before Akudo's first cry pierced the night air. Chinya had fallen in love with a man from across the Forbidden River, a man from a rival clan. The clans of Umuaku and Umulik had been at odds for generations. No one quite remembered the origins of their enmity, but it was a rivalry that burned with the ferocity of 1,000 suns. To love someone from Umulik was to betray your people, your ancestors, your lineage. Yet love, as Chinya discovered, does not recognize boundaries set by men. She met Obina during the annual market fair, where traders from neighboring villages came to sell their wares. He was tall, with the kind of confidence that could only come from someone who knew his place in the world. His voice was deep, like the rumbling of distant thunder, and his laughter contagious. Chinya had not planned to fall in love, but love is rarely planned. They began meeting in secret, hidden away in the dense forest, far from the watchful eyes of their people. For months, their love blossomed in the shadows. But secrets, like seeds, grow and eventually break through the soil to see the light of day. When Chinya discovered she was with child, she knew the end of their secret affair had come. Her belly would soon swell, and the whispers of the village women would grow louder. She confronted Obina, hoping for a solution, but what he offered instead was betrayal. Fearing the wrath of his own people, Obina denied the child and left her to face her fate alone. Chinya returned to Umuaku with a broken heart and a growing belly. It wasn't long before the rumors spread. The village elders summoned her to the Obi, the gathering hut, where they sat in judgment. They accused her of bringing shame upon the village, of dishonoring her ancestors. With no one to speak for her, Chinya was cast out, forced to live on the outskirts of the village, near the dangerous forest, where spirits were said to roam freely. In the months that followed, Chinya lived in isolation, growing weaker with each passing day. When Akudo was born, Chinya, exhausted from labor and heartbreak, looked into her daughter's eyes with a mixture of love and sorrow. She named her Akudo, meaning a peaceful wealth, as a wish for the life she hoped her daughter might have, a life that had eluded her. But peace did not come for Chinya. She passed away shortly after Akudo's birth, leaving the infant alone in the world. The village women found the crying baby 2 days later, her tiny body wrapped in tattered cloth, her mother cold and still beside her. The elders debated what to do. Some wanted to leave the child in the forest, believing her birth to be cursed. Others pitied the innocent baby and suggested she be taken in by one of the families in the village. But no one stepped forward. In the end, it was agreed that Akudo would be cared for by Neka, an old widow who lived alone at the edge of the village. Neka had no children of her own, and her husband had died many years ago. She was known for her sharp tongue and her even sharper mind. Though she had no particular affection for babies, she reluctantly accepted the responsibility. For the first few years of her life, Akudo grew up under Neka's roof, learning the ways of the village. But the villagers never let her forget who she was, the abandoned child of a disgraced woman. The children refused to play with her, and the adults whispered behind her back. Even Neka, despite raising her, never showed her much affection. "Stay out of trouble, girl," Neka would say, her voice rough from years of chewing bitter cola. "You're lucky I took you in. The spirits are watching you, remember that." Akudo grew accustomed to the isolation. She spent her days helping Neka with chores, fetching water from the stream, gathering firewood, and sweeping the compound. In the evenings, she would sit by the fire, listening to the crackling flames and imagining a life beyond the village, a life where she wasn't constantly reminded of her mother's shame and her own abandonment. Despite her loneliness, Akudo found solace in the natural world around her. The forest, feared by many in the village, became her sanctuary. She wandered its paths, learning the names of the trees, the songs of the birds, and the secrets of the plants. It was in the forest that she felt closest to her mother, as though Chinya's spirit lived among the trees, guiding her steps. One day, when Akudo was about 12 years old, she ventured deeper into the forest than she ever had before. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss, and the trees towered above her like silent sentinels. She came upon a clearing she had never seen before, and in the center of the clearing stood a tall, ancient Iroko tree. Its branches stretched toward the sky, and its roots twisted and curled like the limbs of an old, wise man. As Akudo approached the tree, she felt a strange sensation, a tingling in her fingertips, a fluttering in her chest. It was as though the tree was calling to her. She reached out and placed her hand on its rough bark. In that moment, the world around her seemed to shift. The air grew still, and the forest fell silent. "Akudo," a voice whispered, soft but unmistakable. "You are not like the others," the spirit continued. "You have a gift, Akudo. A connection to the land, to the trees, to the very essence of life itself. A gift." Akudo repeated, her voice trembling. "Yes," the spirit said. "And it is time for you to embrace it." Over the weeks that followed, Akudo returned to the clearing every day, drawn by the voice of the spirit. The spirit taught her the ways of the forest, how to communicate with the trees, how to listen to the whispers of the wind, how to harness the energy that flowed through the earth. Akudo learned quickly, her connection to the natural world growing stronger with each passing day. As her powers grew, so did her confidence. She no longer felt like the abandoned child of a disgraced woman. She was something more, something powerful. But with power came responsibility, and the spirit warned her that the time would soon come when she would have to use her gift to protect the village that had once turned its back on her. One fateful evening, dark clouds gathered over Umuaku, and a strange unease settled over the village. The air was thick with tension, and the villagers whispered of an impending disaster. That night, as Akudo sat by the fire in Neka's hut, she felt a familiar tingling in her chest, the same sensation she had felt the first time she had touched the Iroko tree. Something was coming. Akudo left the hut and made her way to the forest, her heart pounding in her chest. As she approached the clearing, the spirit's voice echoed in her mind. Akudo, the time has come. A great danger approaches. You must protect the village. What danger? Akudo asked, her voice barely a whisper. The river, the spirit replied. It has been angry for many years, and now it seeks to reclaim the land. Akudo's mind raced. The river was the lifeblood of the village, providing water for drinking, farming, and washing. But it was also a force of nature, capable of great destruction when angered. What can I do? Akudo asked, her voice trembling. You can do what only you have been chosen to do, Akudo. Use your gift to speak to the river, calm its rage, and protect your people. Akudo hesitated. The river was mighty and unpredictable, a force that had shaped the land for centuries. The idea of confronting it filled her with fear. She had only just begun to understand the extent of her powers, and now she was being asked to face a danger that no one else in the village could even comprehend. But the spirit's voice was firm, and Akudo knew there was no time to waste. The winds began to pick up as she rushed through the forest, her feet moving swiftly over the familiar paths. Branches whipped at her skin, and the sky above darkened with thick, angry clouds. As she neared the village, she could hear the distant roar of the river, louder and more violent than she had ever heard it before. By the time Akudo reached the riverbank, the villagers were already gathered, their faces filled with terror as they watched the water rise, churning angrily as if possessed by a vengeful spirit. The river was overflowing its banks, and the once calm waters were now a raging torrent, sweeping away everything in their path, trees, rocks, and even parts of the crops the villagers had worked so hard to cultivate. The elders stood at the edge of the crowd, helpless. They had seen floods before, but never anything like this. The river had never been this furious. Akudo, one of the village children, cried, spotting her. What can we do? The water will take everything. Akudo's heart clenched as she looked at the frightened faces around her. These were the same people who had shunned her, who had never allowed her to forget the circumstances of her birth. Yet, in their fear, they looked to her, the girl who had been abandoned, the child of the cursed woman. Akudo stepped forward, her bare feet sinking into the wet earth, and faced the raging river. The roar of the water was deafening, but beneath it, she could feel the pulse of the land, the rhythm of life itself. The spirit had been right. She had a gift, a connection to the natural world that no one else in the village had. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and stretched out her hands toward the water. She could feel the river's anger, its frustration, its need to reclaim what had been lost. But there was something else, too. Beneath the fury, there was sorrow. The river was grieving, mourning something long forgotten by the villagers. With her eyes still closed, Akudo spoke, not with her voice, but with her heart. River, I hear you, she whispered. I feel your pain. But this is not the way. The people of this village have not understood your suffering, but I do. I understand the balance you seek. Let me help you. Let me bring peace." At first, nothing happened. The water continued to surge, and the villagers murmured in confusion. But Akudo remained still, her heart open to the river's pain. She reached deeper, connecting with the very essence of the water, the earth, and the sky. Slowly, the roar of the river began to subside. The violent waves calmed, and the water receded back into its banks. The villagers gasped in astonishment as the once turbulent river returned to its normal, peaceful flow. The dark clouds above parted, allowing the moon to shine down on the village once more. Akudo opened her eyes, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. She had done it. She had spoken to the river, and it had listened. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the villagers erupted in cheers, their fear replaced by relief and awe. They rushed toward Akudo, surrounding her with words of gratitude and praise. The same people who had once turned their backs on her were now lifting her up, calling her hero. "Akudo," they cried. "Akudo has saved us." But Akudo knew it wasn't just her who had saved the village. It was the spirit of the forest, the river itself, and the land that had guided her. She smiled faintly, but deep inside, she knew that this was only the beginning. There was still much to learn, much to understand. That night, as the villagers celebrated, Akudo slipped away and returned to the clearing in the forest. The ancient Iroko tree stood tall and silent, its branches swaying gently in the breeze. "You did well, child," the spirit's voice echoed softly. "I was afraid," Akudo admitted, her voice quiet. "I didn't know if I could do it." "The greatest power comes from facing fear," the spirit replied. "And now you understand your place in this world. You are not just an abandoned child. You are a protector, a bridge between the land and its people." Akudo nodded, though the weight of the spirit's words pressed heavily on her shoulders. She had discovered her gift, but with it came a responsibility she hadn't fully anticipated. "Will the river be calm now?" she asked, glancing up at the sky, where the last remnants of the storm clouds were fading. "For now," the spirit said. "But the balance of the world is delicate. There will always be challenges, and there will always be those who seek to disrupt the harmony. You must remain vigilant." Akudo felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't let the fear take root. She had faced the river, and she had prevailed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she would face them with the same courage and strength. Over the years, Akudo grew into her role as the village's protector, though her journey was far from easy. The villagers, once fearful of her, now revered her, but they also came to rely on her more than she had anticipated. Every drought, every strange illness, every unusual occurrence was brought to her attention, as though she alone held the answers to all of nature's mysteries. Yet, through it all, Akudo never lost her connection to the forest, to the spirit that had first guided her. She continued to visit the ancient Iroko tree, seeking wisdom and understanding. And as time went on, she came to realize that her gift was not just for the village, but for the land itself, for the rivers, the trees, the animals, and all the life that surrounded her. One day, as Akudo stood at the edge of the forest, looking out over the village that had once abandoned her, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was no longer the unwanted child, no longer the outcast. She was Akudo, the protector, the healer, the one who had brought balance to her people and to the land. And in that moment, she knew that her mother's wish for her had come true. She had found her peace, her wealth, not in gold or possessions, but in the connection she had forged with the world around her. She was Akudo, the child of the land, and she was never truly abandoned.